Despite the fact that they won, Republican lawmakers, strategists, and operatives are publicly and privately panicking about the results of last night's special election in Tennessee's ruby red 7th Congressional District because it continued the trend of Democrats massively overperforming. And these Republicans are terrified and have reason to believe that that trend will continue in the 2026 midterms. And if that happens, they're going to get wiped out in a blue wave by the dozens in the House of Representatives and potentially the Senate, and it will end Trump's presidency 2 years in advance. But before we unpack all that, if you end up liking this video and you want to support the channel, please be sure to hit the like, subscribe, and alert bells before you go. All right, friends, in our previous video, we talked about Trump's reaction to the election, and we looked kind of generically at the election at the broadest possible view. I want to widen the aperture and not just look into a bit more of the data, but I want to show you the reaction from key Republican operatives, strategists, and lawmakers, including Governor Ron DeSantis of Florida. They're all freaking out about this. They are sounding the alarm. But before we get to their reaction, let's look a bit more at the data. As CJ Warwick points out, every county in Tennessee's 7th Congressional District moved to the left. Remember during the 2024 election that Trump and his supporters were like, every county in the United States moved to the right. It's a mandate. It's a mandate. It's a landslide. Well, that happened in ruby red Tennessee's 7th Congressional District. All these deep red counties moved to the left. That's not good. That does not portend good things to come. Bashirstan, which is an account that follows and supports Democratic Governor Andy Beshear, my former governor, they put together this handy visual saying, okay, well, you know what? This was a special election. If the trend continues, and as it has been, into 2026, what could that look like at a national level? Well, as they point out, if this trend holds at the national level in the midterms, it could result in Democrats winning 250 seats and Republicans winning 184 in the House of Representatives. Again, a blue tsunami. Now, that, again, not guaranteed, but it just visualizes what is possible based on the results in an election which should not have had these results, right? As Laksha Jain, who is a more centrist, more moderate polling analyst. He's a friend of the show. We talked to him on Live and Learn, the podcast that I used to co-host. You should definitely check those guys out. He points this out. He goes, leave the binary of did you win aside, because again, Republicans won last night. He says, I also think this is a major red flag for Republicans. Turnout hit 2022 midterm levels, so this was not a low turnout election. The Republicans got boots on the ground. They sent surrogates out there. They got out there, and people turned out to vote. Democrats ran a DSAS candidate, and that was Afton Bain, right? So I like Afton Bain personally, but there is the argument, we'll see what the postmortem says, that they should have ran a more moderate candidate in this, ruby red district, right? They did not run a moderate candidate. They ran her in a Trump plus 22 seat, and they got massively outspent by the millions. Republicans had to pour in millions of dollars to try to save this seat. And then Democrats only lost by 9% in a Trump plus 22 seat. They overperformed despite all of those things by 13 points. That's really bad for the GOP, as he points out. Jake Sherman of Punchbowl News points out in this context, Mike Johnson has a brutal 11 months ahead. Trump has often complained about being exhausted on the job, but he's about to enter a stretch that could be the most trying time for any speaker in modern times, talking about the upcoming elections. Punchbowl's rundown here is good, as Aaron Frischner points out, and here's another problem for Johnson that'll creep up next year: attendance. Republicans have 18 members running for offices next year, compared to just 8 Dems. Campaigning will keep them out of D.C., a significant vote math issue. Going back to C.G. Warwick, he also points out, this is where we get into the Republican response, okay? This is how Republicans are reacting. Here's what Republicans are saying about last night's results or tonight's results, because this was yesterday, in Tennessee's 7th Congressional District. Quote, tonight is a sign that 2026 is going to be a bitch of an election cycle. Another quote, one of the biggest flashing red light warnings we've seen yet for Republicans. Third quote, the conference may come unhinged. But wait, there's more. More top Republicans pile on. Quote, it was too close, said one House GOP leadership aide. Quote, none of it bodes well for the GOP in the midterms. Quote, the winds are likely to blow against Republicans in federal races in 2026. Not good. You know who a prominent Republican, a very successful Republican, a guy who's a two-term governor of a red state, Florida, who's made it even more red? Ron DeSantis, one of the biggest names in Republican politics. He went on the record about this. He says, special off-year election and midterm elections historically benefit the party out of power because its voters are motivated to vote, while voters of the incumbent party are more complacent. This is more glaring for today's GOP because a chunk of voters who put them in power in 2024 are Trump-specific voters. They will vote GOP down ballot when Trump is running, but won't turn out to vote for a typical congressman in a midterm when Trump isn't running. So that is that is Ron DeSantis sounding the alarm. Okay. So we're going to look at some deeper reporting about this in just a second. But again, Meredith Lee Hill talking about Politico again, quote, tonight is a sign that 2026 is going to be a bitch of an election cycle, one House Republican said. Quote, Republicans can survive if we play team and the Trump administration officials play smart. Neither is certain, end quote. Matt Whitlock, another prominent right-winger, says this is one of the biggest flashing red light warning signs we've seen yet for Republicans. If every House district in the country shifted left by this same amount, about 15 points, we would be looking at a blue wave far worse than 2018, estimated 43 seats flipping again, going back to what we saw at the beginning. C.J. Warnock points out, if top Republican strategists are sounding the alarm like this publicly, like that he's talking about Matt Whitlock, you can only imagine the meltdown being had behind closed doors. So with that in mind, let's take a look. Despite loss, Democrats overperformed in bright red Tennessee House race. Democrats notched an off-cycle achievement Tuesday night as Tennessee lawmaker Afton Bain sliced into Donald Trump's double-digit victory in a deep red House district. It marked the latest demonstration of voters' dissatisfaction with Republicans' grip on power as the parties head into next year's pivotal midterms. The narrow margin gave Democrats cause to celebrate as they fight to retake the House next year, and it spelled trouble for Mike Johnson's efforts to retain his slim majority. Even though Van Epps won, the Republicans significantly underperformed Trump's 22-point rout in the district last year as Bain lured voters with a well-funded campaign focused singularly on affordability. Democrats, projecting confidence after their Election Day overperformance last month throughout the country, quickly highlighted the thinner-than-usual margin as a sign of their strength heading into next year's midterms, when they must net just 3 seats, to seize control over the House. Quote, this was a district that Trump won handedly, and he and his billionaire friends had to spend millions of dollars to bolster their candidate of choice, Bain said during an interview on CNN shortly before the network called the race. Trump, again, we talked about Trump's reaction. Disregard that. See my previous video about it. It's not often that a single House race garners so much national money and attention, but the unusual timing, an off-cycle election to fill a vacancy, sandwiched between Thanksgiving and Christmas, boosted its relevance as both parties anxiously prepare for their midterm slowdown. Let's see. Republican and Democratic super PACs flooded the airwaves in home stretch, with GOP groups outspending Democratic ones $3.1 million to $2.3 billion, so nearly $1 million more dollars had to be spent by Republicans to defend their own home turf, right? Republican ads sought to tie Bain to culture war issues, including her support for defunding police departments and transgender surgeries. Her ads mostly focused on affordability and healthcare, but spent some time attacking Van Epps over the release of the Epstein files. Trump supported Van Epps in the competitive primary and dialing into the contest in its final days. But even with Trump's support, Van Epps' campaign and the GOP outside groups remained more focused on hitting Bain than touting Republican policies. So again, they were keeping their distance from Trump. Quote, running from Trump is how you lose. Running with Trump is how you win, Van Epps said during his victory speech, except that's not actually how he won. Democrats tapped into their own firepower. Vice President Kamala Harris made her first post-election stump speech to support Bain. AOC and former Vice President Al Gore closed out the race during a tele-rally Monday. Quote from Ken Martin of the Democratic National Committee, which we talked about in a previous video. Despite their exuberance, Van Epps' win is a boon for Johnson, who is managing a razor-thin majority in the House, where there's still 2 vacancies in Democratic-leaning seats. But among GOP members of Congress, the mood heading into the election was one of concern. Quote, if our victory margin is in single digits, the conference may come unhinged. And it was in single digits. One senior House Republican told Politico ahead of the race. As the midterm arguments continue to focus broadly on the national landscape, Democrats see Bain's performance in a ruby red district as a sign that they can flip more than enough seats to overtake the House. Quote, it's an insane result, and the Republicans in Congress and this White House have shown zero signs of being able to stop the bleeding. It's going to get worse for them before it gets better. To that end, they're hoping to unseat Representative Andy Ogles in the neighboring 5th District, which went for Trump by 18 points last year, making it more favorable for the party. They already have a strong candidate who tops fundraising lists. And while she didn't emerge victorious, her focus on affordability and the ability to reach rural voters in a geographically vast district is something Democrats will hope to replicate across the map next year. Republicans, at least publicly, are not reading too much into the margin. Special elections generally favor Democrats, and this race is post-Thanksgiving timing, they say, and it was bound to decrease turnout. But again, it didn't decrease turnout. 2022 midterm results. Let's see here. Nevertheless, House Republicans privately bemoaned the results. Mike Johnson's leadership team was bracing for a tighter than comfortable race, and the single-digit margin was a hard pill to swallow after a national Republicans raced to rescue Van Epps in the final days. Quote, "It was too close," said one of the House GOP leadership aides. Quote, "Tonight is a sign that 2026 is going to be a bitch of an election cycle. Republicans can survive if we play team and the Trump administration officials play smart. Neither is certain." Look at some other things as well. Subsequent article about this. GOP threats dangerous result in Tennessee. Republicans are worried the slim margin of victory in Tuesday's special election may doom them in 2026. So let's see here. The Democratic outperformance could be a harbinger of what House Republicans will face in the midterms next year, members and strategists warned, as they seek to hold on to their narrow control of the chamber. In the wake of these victories, some Republicans urged the White House to retool its political message to better engage moderate voters and independents who broke for Trump in the presidential election. Well, I'm glad we won, but the GOP should not ignore the Virginia, New Jersey, and Tennessee elections. We must reach swing voters. America wants some normalcy. That's Congressman Don Bacon, a Republican, who, by the way, is retiring and not seeking re-election. House Republican leadership had been preparing for Tuesday night's results, and while Johnson's leadership team was bracing for a tighter than comfortable race, the single-digit margin was still a hard pill to swallow. Again, we talked about this, too close. Matthew Bartlett, a GOP strategist and appointee in the first Trump administration, said the single-digit margin for Van Epps continues the momentum Democrats already feel after the New Jersey and Virginia races. Quote, "None of it bodes well for the GOP in the midterms," Bartlett said. Quote, "Being an ostrich with your head in the sand on the key issues that matter most to Americans is not a strategy, or certainly not a winning one." Senator Ted Cruz directly tied Van Epps' underperformance to Democratic voters motivated by the disapproval of Trump, and he pleaded with Republicans to, quote, "set out the alarm with Republican voters about the consequences of losing control of the House and the Senate." Quote, "It was dangerous. We could have lost this district because people who showed up, many of them are the ones who were motivated by how much they dislike Donald Trump," Cruz said in a Fox News interview Tuesday evening. Quote, "In a year, it's going to be a turnout election, and the left will show up. Hate is a powerful motivator." And he would know because Republicans are motivated entirely by that. Turnout was extraordinarily high for a special election, outpacing the 2022 midterms. Again, that's when people say, well, low turnout doesn't matter. No. This is huge. Van Epps got roughly 90% of the number of raw votes that Mark Green, who previously held this district, got that year, while Bain got over 115% of the 2022 Democratic nominees total. One GOP consultant, granted anonymity to speak candidly, worried the result in Tennessee signals that Republican voters won't turn out in significant numbers for candidates other than Trump, a problem that has plagued Republicans in the past. Quote, "The Trump coalition is captivated by the force of his personality and his willingness to disrupt the established order. There's not much interest in supporting other politicians when Trump isn't on the ballot," he said. Quote, "The winds are likely to blow against Republicans in federal races in 2026. People are rarely satisfied anymore, and they're looking for someone to punish." So, folks, they are, it's not good. They are freaking out, as well they should be. So again, even though they technically won, they seem more panicked than satisfied about last night's results. And even though we lost the race, I would argue the Democrats, liberals, and progressives have much more to be satisfied and encouraged and inspired by than the Republicans do. So it says something that all these people are publicly and privately panicking. And I imagine it's only going to get worse as time goes on. But that's where you and I and Democratic politicians and Democratic candidates, again, the people in power and out of power, have to work our asses off to make their fears, the Republican fears, a reality by the 2026 midterms. In the meantime, let me know what you think in the comments.